All right, welcome to your next demo. This demo is going to be spooky. So let's go ahead and get started and get into it. So the first thing you need to do is make a copy of the document. To do that, you will click on these three. You'll click on Copy Workspace. There also is a button that just says Copy Workspace on yours. So you would do that. Remember, the link is in Google Classroom, so if you're wondering where the document is, go to Google Classroom. And then when you do that, you need to make sure you rename it with your class abbreviation here and with your last name. So once you get that all started, what you're going to notice is that we have three separate part studios that we're going to be working in. So you're going to be doing something in each of these three, and you need to do all three to get full credit for this assignment. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with this first part. So if you notice, it looks like this first part is like super tiny. And if we look at it, kind of get a little bit better angle on this, it is a skull, and it looks like it's been extruded 5 millimeters, but apparently when we made this design, we dimensioned our image, we dimensioned our image way too small, 5 millimeters. But these keychains, we wanted to make them 50 millimeters, 5 millimeters, really tiny, gonna be too small. So let's think about how we could actually make this bigger without having to retrace the entire sketch. All right, well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to hide the image because that's going to confuse you. We're really only going to be working with the trace. So this would be something, if you've already done a trace and you want to make it bigger, you want to make it smaller, you want to make it fit, but you have to have that sketch already done. So we're going to be in that sketch. So to get in that sketch, remember you have to double click. And then we're going to go ahead and look at it from the top. And as you can see, it's really small right now. So if we want to make this 50 millimeters, like it should be, the width of 50, we're going to have to multiply this thing or scale this by a factor of 10. And to do that, we have to use the transform tool. So in order to use the transform sketch tool, what we have to do is we have to highlight everything that we want to transform. So we have to highlight all of those lines that we want to make bigger. And then if you go to your drop down here, so normally it's like the linear pattern. If you change it to the transform tool, all you have to do is click the drop down, click transform, and then you get a couple options, okay? So if you just want to move this sketch around, move it left, move it right, you can either use these arrows, so that'll move it, left or right, or you could use the up and down. You could also use, if you click on the square right in the middle there, that'll move it anywhere you want it to be. So you could do any of those. You can also rotate it. So if you click on this little kind of circle with the lines on it there, you could rotate it by a specific angle. So if you wanted to do that, you could do that. But we want to actually scale this up. So to scale it up, to make it bigger, we need to click on the triangle, and then you can see it starts to scale. So instead of like dragging this all the way to 50 or to 10, because we want to multiply by a factor of 10, 5 times 10 is 50, we can just type that number in. So you do have to click the triangle first for these numbers to come up. If you don't click the triangle and drag it a little bit, then you won't see the numbers. So make sure you click, drag that triangle just a little bit, and then you can type in that factor of 10, and you'll see that it makes your sketch way bigger than that 5 little millimeter thing we had before. And then you just need to click anywhere outside of this area where it says green. Just click one time, double click, and boom. Now we have a transformed sketch, and then when we confirm the sketch, the extrude will also reflect that, and now you can see that we have a keychain or a little skull that is the size that we would want. And so we could print this out and have a little spooky keychain. Okay, so that's the first thing you got to do there. And now we can move on to sketch 2. Now this one, you're going to get to be a little bit more creative, but if you look, actually, we have something that's a little bit similar of a problem. So if we go into our image and we look at how big it is, it was dimensioned to be 10. And it's going to be really hard to carve a 10 millimeter pumpkin. It's going to be super small. So we're going to have to do that same scaling up with the trace sketch first, and then we can actually get into the carving. So if you remember, we want to hide the image so that doesn't confuse us. Get into our trace sketch, so double click on trace to get in there. Highlight everything that we want to scale up. We're using the transform tool, which should be up here now. If it's not, you click the drop down and you go transform, and then drag it up just a little bit. Now this time it was 10 to start, so if we want it to be that same 50 millimeter keychain, we would just multiply it by a factor of 5, and that would give us a 50 millimeter little pumpkin here. So again, we just click outside, and now when we confirm this trace, that extrude will reflect that. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do, and that's just a little bit of practice, just scaling up objects, scaling them down, moving them around. Sometimes when you have a trace, it takes a long time to do that, and you don't want to have to redo the entire thing. If you just need to make it bigger or smaller, the transform tool is great for that. All right, so now that we've got this thing extruded and scaled up correctly, what we're going to do is get into the actual name of this video or this demo, which is Extrude Remove. So with Extrude, you saw yesterday that what you can do is you can build up from a sketch. And that's great. That's actually how we created this object here. But I want to show you another way that you can extrude, which is removing material away from an object that you already created. So in this case here, we're just going to do a little face on this pumpkin, and we're going to carve it out all the way through. So now that we have the 50 millimeter keychain, you can put a face on here, and that could be a fun little thing to do. So in order to do this, we need to create a sketch. But when we're creating the sketch, we're actually going to create it on the surface that we want to cut away. So we want to cut away from here. We're going to click, when it asks us for a sketch plane, we're going to click on that surface. So the sketch plane here is the face of Extrude 1, and that's the way it should be. So the next step then is to actually create the sketch, or to create the thing that you want to extrude away. So just like when we were doing the college keychains, it has to be closed spaces. You cannot extrude remove. You cannot extrude anything that is an open sketch. So it needs to be a closed space. So we'll go ahead and we'll start just with some eyes here. I'm going to show you a few different sketch tools that maybe you haven't used yet. Notice how I'm leaving that automatic constraint on horizontally. I want that to be there. If you see, this is kind of a weird looking eye. It's because not all of these lines are equal. There's an equals constraint that can help us with that. When we use the equals constraint, you just have to click 2 of the lines. They'll set those 2 equal, and then click the other 2 lines. So now all 3 of those are equal. And then we can set the dimension for one of the lines. If we want it to be 5, then it'll change the other 2 as well. So all 3 of these are 5. Perfect. Okay, so I want to copy this, and unfortunately it's not as easy as copying and pasting. Actually, it's easier than copying and pasting. So if we want to copy some element, if we want to do it in a linear fashion, so we want to copy this, we want to put it right over here, so we want to make it in a line, there's this great tool called a linear pattern. So in order to use that tool, much like when you're using the transform tool, you have to highlight all of the parts, all the lines that you want to actually copy, and then you click on that linear pattern, and then notice what it does. It just makes a copy of that, and it does it a certain number of times. So if you only want 1 copy, you change this to 2, and that'll give you 2 of them. And then you can also set the distance between those 2 things. So 25 seems like it's really far away. Maybe 18 would be a little bit better. I think that looks good. And then you just click to confirm. So now you have that copied twice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just move these dimensions out of the way because I do need to add in a little smile for my pumpkin here. So in order to do that, I'm going to use the 3-point arc tool. And with this 3-point arc tool, remember, you click at the start of the arc, you click at the end of the arc, and then you click where you want the radius to go. So we have that. There's our arc. That's great. And then I want to connect this together with a little smile. Okay. Now, you can get as creative as you want. Honestly, I'd love to see you be more creative, so I want you to make like a really cool, funny face on this. But for right now, you can pause the video, and then you can make your own face. And then once you're finished making your sketch, you can come back and I'll show you how to do this extrude remove. Okay, so hopefully you have a really cool and original and funny face on here, and it's not, just like my boring one. But I'm going to show you how to now extrude remove those areas that you made from the background. Now remember, when you're creating that sketch, they had to all be closed spaces. So here's a closed space. So I'm going to click on that closed space, inside that closed space. Then I'm going to go up here, click inside that closed space. And then same thing up here, I'm going to click on that closed space. And if I had more closed spaces, then I would click on those as well. But those are the only ones that I did. So once you have those areas selected, and only those areas selected, then you're going to go ahead and you're going to do an extrude. Now the default extrude is going to add, and it's going to add it on, and it's going to look really, really weird. So what we need to do is we have to actually change this from add to remove. And when we do that, you can see it actually is going to be cutting through that object. So it changes the direction and it changes what it's doing. Now it's cutting out instead of adding on. Okay. Now, if for some reason you get something red like this, that just means that your direction is not in the right direction. So you just need to click on this arrow, and then it'll go in the right direction. Because if you're doing a remove and you're going this way, well, there's nothing for it to remove. Because remember, that sketch was on the top of the extrude. So if you get the red, just click that arrow. That'll change it to the right direction, and then you're good to go. Now, if there was something behind this that you didn't want it to extrude through, you can change the depth of the extrude, or the remove, just like you can with the add. So maybe if I didn't want to cut all the way through my pumpkin, I could change that depth to be, maybe 2 millimeters or, 3, instead of having it go all the way through. And so then on the back, you would still have it solid, and it would just be like a little cutout there. Okay, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut all the way through. So there's a couple ways. You can either do blind and then just make it a depth that is more than whatever the material you have. The other way you can do it, just to make it easy, is just go through all, and that will just cut all the way through whatever part you're extruding it through. So if you make it through all and you confirm that, you should have a really cool little pumpkin keychain. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and switch over to our third part studio here, which is our jack-o'-lantern carving. And we're actually going to be cutting away from this 3D pumpkin that was already created. So notice the pumpkin's already created. Please do not go in there. If you want to see how it was created, you can kind of check it out. Lots of steps in here, but actually it's not too difficult to do. So eventually, by the end of the year, you probably could do something like that yourself. But what we're going to be doing with this is we're actually just going to be carving this pumpkin. So we're not going to be creating it, we're just going to be carving it. You already have the pumpkin. So in order to do this, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a plane that's kind of on the outside of the pumpkin. Because if we start to try to draw on this front plane here, the whole pumpkin object's going to get in the way. So in order to do that, we can either right-click on this plane here, or we can right-click in the timeline. We need to click Offset Plane. And what that will do is it'll create another surface for us to sketch on, but it'll create it at a distance away from where that current plane is. And so if we move that outside of the pumpkin, so you can see that this surface is now on the outside. Doesn't matter how far away you go, just as long as it's outside. Now we can confirm that, and we'll have if we hide the front plane, we'll have this new plane 8 that we can sketch on and then extrude remove through the pumpkin. So we'll go ahead and jump to looking at it from the front. And so you can kind of see we have this plane 8. You know that it's actually on the outside of the pumpkin, but it allows us to line it up so we can kind of see where we're going to do all of our carving. So let's go ahead and get into the carving. To do that, we're going to create a sketch on plane 8. This again is where you're going to get to be creative. So I'm going to be doing just a simple little kind of triangles like I did before, using my horizontal dimensions, using my equals constraints, and using a little linear transform pattern. But you can do whatever you want. So use this time, pause the video, make a really cool carving. Alright, and once you have your carving all set, we're going to do something very similar to what we did before, but we just need to make sure that depth that we're extruding doesn't go too far, but does go far enough. So again, we're going to select just the areas of our sketch that we want to actually extrude, or we want to remove. And then we're going to do the extrude. We're going to change it to remove. And so hopefully, when we do remove, we kind of see this go into our pumpkin. So you can kind of see the inside of the pumpkin there. That's cool. It's red on the inside. You can see it was all cut out. And by going 25 millimeters, we're going perfect. So if we went, through all like we did before, that would not give us something that we want. If we did through all, that would cut through the back of the part as well. And I don't know, I've never seen a two-faced pumpkin. Maybe that would actually be kind of cool, but that's not something that we're going for. So in this case here, we're not going to use the through all. We're going to use the blind, and then we're going to set the depth to be 25 millimeters in this case. It depends on how far you offset that plane, but you just need to make sure that this depth of the extrude is far enough that it's actually in there, because if it's not far enough, what you'll see is it'll look weird. Only part of your sketch will get extruded. Maybe you only get a mouth. But again, you don't want to go too far. So pulling that about right towards the middle will allow you to do that. And then when you confirm that extrude, you'll see that you have a nice carved out pumpkin. Great. So hopefully I'm going to see some awesome, really cool, funny pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns. And hopefully you learned a couple things in this video and it didn't spook you out too much. We'll see you in class soon.